Hey Jess, welcome to my channel. And today we are doing a lovely, juicy reading on what is obscuring your vision. And I was thinking existentially on this one, so no pressure. But, in terms of enlightenment, what is obscuring your vision? Now, if you came to this reading with a simpler question of what could be obscuring your vision in a certain situation or, at work or dealing with a certain person, then I would hope that you could still pick one of these piles and it would still give you something helpful or something useful, a certain insight like on that situation. But yeah, I was thinking more existentially, how Jesus says in the Bible, first remove the log from thine own eye. I think about that quote all the time. So I was curious if we did a reading with 3 piles for those of us who came here, what Spirit would have to say about the log that, or maybe even logs, because you could potentially be drawn to more than one pile. But what is blocking your own vision in regards to that? So we've got 3 piles here. I'll put the picture up. Just as in any other reading, like you could be drawn to more than one pile. With that being said, I'll put the picture up and you can do your thing, and then I'll see you at your pile. Okay, so pile number 1, what is obscuring your vision? What is the log in your own eye? So really quick before we dive into this, I hope that it's apparent by the very ambitious nature of this reading that I'm going to need a lot more grace in terms of my explanations of what's going on here in the cards, because words are just so inherently limited and so frustrating, and by their very nature can only ever be the finger pointing to the moon and not the moon. Whether you're reading it in a text, whether you're listening to somebody talk about spiritual things, there's something about words that's just constricting and they bottleneck, and you're like, that's as close as I can get you, right? And I just know that I'm going to have that feeling with this reading, and I just needed to say that before we go diving in here. So, okay, pile number 1. I feel like this group of people you're definitely spiritual. I think that you would consider yourself spiritual in whatever way you do. You might not use that word. Maybe it's religious. Maybe there's a certain group or sect or train of thought that you belong to and you would use that word. But there's a feeling to this pile of like pursuit of spirituality, spiritual knowledge, spiritual realization. And so whether or not you would use like the term spiritual seeker, I definitely feel like that's an appropriate archetype here, because that's kind of the first thing they're narrowing in on is that word seeker. Like they keep circling it, and a lot of us have probably heard that old adage that the one who seeks is not the one who finds, right? And it's kind of along the same lines as it's the I, right? The individual I, it's the little self that seeks, right? That has an agenda, that has a goal, that could even see themselves as separate from spirituality enough to begin with, to even begin a pursuit. And as they say in many spiritual traditions, the I cannot be enlightened, right? So some of you are trying to enlighten your I, and you're trying to do that through the pursuit of spiritual knowledge. Now, I'm going to explain that a little bit more. Again, I hope you're being very graceful with me in terms of my words, but there's an inherent gap, right, between the seeker, because to seek something inherently means that you haven't found it, and to find. And I feel like that's something they're trying to kind of point to here. Now, a lot has happened though, I feel like, on your journey, on your pursuit of this spiritual knowledge. And a lot of that has been the accumulation of good karmas for yourself through right action, right deed, proper thought, compassion, service, being harmonious, and all of that is well and good, and it can't be discounted, but on the other hand, it kind of can. And I know that's a weird thing to say, but let's just put that over to the side here for a second, because the other thing that's happened is you have indeed accumulated knowledge. And just again, to highlight the limitations of words here, especially colloquial language and how we talk about things, because I would see this in a reading, the type of knowledge you have, the type of life you live, and I would call the knowledge that you've accumulated spiritual knowledge, because it surrounds spiritual topics, or like spiritual texts. Regardless of which avenues you've explored, you have explored, things about like what is life, and maybe it's you have studied karmas, or things like that. But what they're wanting me to do is reframe that from saying that it's spiritual knowledge. They're saying for this group, no, it's not anymore. It's not spiritual knowledge. They don't want you to think of it like that. They want you to rethink of it, as Adyashanti put it, as sooty knowledge. Like he said in the poem A Tendency to Shine, this will not be more sooty knowledge to perfume your mind with, right? And instead, he uses a bunch of visceral language to point to an experience, a clarifying experience. There is something clarifying in a bodily experience that kind of goes beyond this mind, this knowledge, right? Like I was saying in the beginning, the words can only ever be the finger pointing to the moon. So in order to describe this like more deeply, we have to kind of look at what it means to know something from an Eastern perspective versus a Western perspective here, just really, really quickly. Because in the West, which is very associated with the left brain and categorization and masculine thought and order and structure, right? It's said that you know something if you read it in a book, or if you go to a conference, or you take a class, as long as you can fill in the blank, on a test, the right word that goes there, and you can color in the right bubble. Even if you've never had an actual experience of something, you're still said to know something. Whereas in the East, is much more akin to the right brain, the feminine energy, the chaos principle, and Eastern knowledge is much, much more concerned with experience, deep, inner, lived experience. And in order to have an experience, you've got to be alive, right? You've got to be living in one way or another. And not just that, but whenever I think of Eastern knowledge, I think of gnosis, which has a momentum, and there's like a transformational element that is akin to, it's like knowledge that helps you transform. So it's really no wonder that you have this beautiful, rich tradition arising from Eastern knowledge, right? From their teachers, which teachers are keepers of knowledge. And you very much have Western and Eastern teachers in regards to spirituality, which I feel like is being highlighted for you here. That having a Western teacher with book knowledge, sooty knowledge, or many of them in the form of books and lectures and things like that, is not going to be the same or as beneficial in terms of experience as having somebody that's more of an Eastern teacher that has had this lived experience, has had a realization, right? An enlightened person is somebody who has realized. They've had this realization that was experiential, that was transformative. First, it transformed them from the inside out and their worldview and how they relate to things. And then it transforms others around them. And so you see this beautiful tradition emerging of these realized teachers who've had deeply experiential knowledge. And you see that time and time again emerging from the East. So much spiritual religious thought comes from the East. Even if it doesn't come from the physical East, it's still along this Eastern train of thought. And so I feel like even just viewing the knowledge that you have through this Eastern understanding of knowing, not as like knowledge to be acquired or a concept to be understood, limited, turned into a word. Just like Eckhart Tolle says, when we teach children and what a tree is, walk by and they say, "What's that?" And you say, "Oh, that's a tree." That's a naming function. That's not knowing, right? So I feel like we're distinguishing heavily between Western left-brained ways of knowing and Eastern right-brained ways of knowing, because a lot of you are seeking out this Eastern experiential, deep gnosis, transformational experience. That which cannot be named, that which is beyond words, but you're going about it via these Western channels and these Western avenues, these Western teachers of books and learning about concepts and learning the definition of words. I can tell you the definition of nirvana, but I've never experienced it. So if you follow me, you're going to know some cool definitions, but you're not going to have the experience of it. So I feel like one of the things Spirit is saying here is definitely distinguish. Okay, they're saying teachers. There's some heavy teacher energy up in here, like that's giving me this insight. I feel like you've prayed to this person before, or you've connected to this like spiritual energy, the spiritual teacher. And one thing I'm supposed to tell you is all spiritual teachers know themselves to be one, because they recognize that they are the creator, and then they live from that place. They don't live from their little individual I. So this is just like this heavy stream of consciousness that I feel like is wanting to come in and help you if you will accept this energy. I feel like I'm like, if you'll accept Jesus into your heart, we'll baptize you today. That's not what I'm trying to get at here. It just came through, so I said it. Okay. These teachers that want to come through and help, like they're really wanting you to distinguish between when you're studying books and when you're reading and you're learning these words and stuff, just don't call it your spiritual practice, because it's not. That's for entertainment, and it's okay for you to have entertainment. And on some level, maybe it's even beneficial. Like instead of watching Fast and Furious 40,000, you're like reading these books. But call it what it is. It's entertainment. It's mental chewing gum. You don't actually need to know this stuff in order to have the experience. You can have a guy like sitting on a mountaintop that's never heard of the Bhagavad Gita or the Bible or anything like that, who could be perfectly realized in a way that's experiential, right? Because it's our natural state of being. Does that make sense? So for this group, when you're anything that's actually spiritual and heading you towards this deep experiential transformative knowledge, gnosis, right? This is, you've got K2 over here, and K2 is the emblem of the sage. I feel like for a lot of you are being called to an Eastern teacher, and I'll share mine with you at the end of this. I don't want to interrupt the flow of this reading, but just somebody who's really, really helped me just to get you started or pointed in a direction if that's something you're looking for. If it's not something you're looking for and you already know like where you're headed for this, I know that's a deeply, deeply personal thing. So just never mind me. But back to K2, right? It's the headless body. The I cannot be enlightened. It's not the thinking part of the mind that believes itself to be an individual that becomes enlightened. It's experiential. It's from your body. Oh my gosh, I'm having so many realizations about my own life right now. Okay. So yeah. Now, I also want to drag this back over here. This is actually what we're about to get into. That was all preface, believe it or not. This is the bulk of the reading here, is in terms of what is actually blocking your vision. Now, there's something here that's still very ordered. It's still very Western, but it's also very grounded in the material world about how you relate to your spirituality, okay? Because I mentioned before that in your pursuit of spirituality, you've learned a lot of things and you've collected a lot of knowledge, but you've also built up a lot of really, really good karma. That's another thing that's actually blocking your vision and obscuring your vision because you're still on the wheel, okay? What I mean about the wheel is what the Buddhists call the wheel of life, Vedanta calls the wheel of samsara. It's this cycle, right, of birth, death, rebirth, death, birth, death, birth, death. Look at all my study knowledge, right? Just keep in mind, like, what I'm teaching you here is not actual spiritual realization. I'm trying to, hopefully, like, this study knowledge that I have and being specific in what I'm talking about, it just makes my finger pointing to the moon more crisp, right? But sorry, I just like heard myself. Anyways, so what keeps us on this cycle is, of course, our karmas. Karma is described as being very sticky, right? It's the Saturnian sort of energy, and the goal of spirituality and of this knowing, this Eastern form of knowing that's deeply rooted in experience and realization. The goal is liberation off of this wheel. Now, I do feel like because of this Western logos-based influence in your life and on your psyche, and I feel like for a lot of you this happened in childhood, because it's striking me here that you have this impulse towards logos and structure and categorizing. You have this mixed with a naming function, and then you apply it to spirituality. Well, you basically have a religion, right? So for some of you, this was a religious influence. And keep in mind, religion doesn't have to be something like Christianity, Islam. Scientism can be a religion. Anything that has like a fixed structural order to that you are very loyal to, that can have like this religious influence here. But regardless, I do feel like because of this like more Western logos-based, maybe even religious influence, even from your childhood, even if it's something like you no longer go to these services, there's still remnants that are influencing your worldview, and especially like your spiritual worldview here, because, and at the very least, it's somehow warping this goal of liberation for you, either overtly, where you know that maybe the ultimate goal is liberation, but you just want to be working towards good karmas because you want to have better rebirths in your following lives. You know, like not committing to that like liberation experience. But for some of you, you're equating, this would be more subconscious and kind of sneaking around you, that you're equating the buildup of good karmas with liberation from the wheel. And remember what I said, karma is what keeps you bound to the wheel. Good karma is still karma. It's keeping you bound to the wheel, right? So I actually have a lot more to say about that, but I want to hone in on this religion thing really quick because I feel like there's something here that could be helpful for you to understand, like about this religion thing. You ever notice that like Eastern teachers, people who are realized in the way that I described earlier, They don't create religions. They don't. Even Jesus, who a lot of people believe was educated in the East at some point in his life. I don't know here or there about that, right? But he certainly was an Eastern teacher. He didn't set out to start a religion. He didn't write anything down. He didn't instruct anybody to do that, right? And he couldn't have because he was realized. And what I mean by that, right, is imagine Jesus is like a surf instructor. Some of you are like, Jess, listen, it's one thing for you to say that words are hard, please be easy on me. And it's another thing for you to say, Jesus is a surf instructor. But just bear with me on this, okay? I'm trying. But Jesus is a surf instructor, right? He has this experiential knowledge of how he can meet the ocean, right, with himself. And that, of course, is a metaphor for Jesus meeting the world, right, in a way that's successful. He knows how to merge with the world, right? So this religious Western logos-based idea watches Jesus meet the wave at 9 a.m. on a Wednesday. The wave is 3 feet tall. It's coming in on an easterly wind, right? And of course, all of these things that I'm describing, they're very specific to this one wave because Jesus, he came in to meet the world at a specific time and place. So there are cultural elements, there are certain things that we are evolving through as a collective, as individuals, right? So he's meeting the ocean, right? He's meeting the world. But the ocean, the waves are constantly changing how they express, right? This is spirit. Like I said, spirit it's not contained. So for Jesus to think that it's contained, he could create a religion. But because he's realized he doesn't create that. The people who are logos minded, they watch Jesus meet this wave at 9 a.m. on a Wednesday or whenever I said it happened. And they take that snapshot, right? And they bring it over here and then they dissect it and they write a whole bunch of stuff about it, right? And really what they're describing is how you meet a very specific wave, right? A 3-foot wave coming in from the easterly winds, like right? And then they keep this like almost like a beaver dam on a river, right? Like, no, this is like, and then they stick to this. They didn't learn how to surf. Jesus wants to teach you how to surf. Oh my gosh, this is, I'm hearing myself. Instead they would just want to watch and then like kind of try to dissect it. And that's where this naming function comes in and like morality structures, which we'll get into here in just a second. But the Eastern view of it is Jesus wants to teach you how to surf. So he's going to get in the water with you, your guru, your teacher, right? And he's going to not just teach you how to meet this one wave at 9 a.m. that's 3 foot. He's going to teach you the basics of it so that, you can meet a 10-foot wave at 4 o'clock on a Thursday. If you want to. And eventually, so he's going to say, well, if it's coming in and it's big, you want to meet it this way. If it's coming in from the east, you want to meet it this way. If it's coming in from the west, you want to meet it that way, right? All these little things. But eventually, he's going to say to you, look, feel it out. Like, feel your body move, right? Like, how does your body want to meet the wave? And then before you know it, you yourself are a surfer, right? Like, that's what it is. It's not following a system that's external to you and it's cerebral and it's like becomes this checklist of things. So I do feel like there's some level of influence over here. Now back to talking about this this karma system, right? There's something here about your worldview, but that's not quite the right word. It's more like your spiritual self-perception that is deeply intertwined and dependent upon the material world. It's almost like you're echolocating using the material world. And so this energy that bounces back at you, this feedback that you get from the material world, which I feel like is specifically like your level of success energy or like level of blessings or lack thereof, that information from the material world is what you're using to judge yourself and to like figure out where you're at spiritually speaking. And even you doing that, it's hierarchical. It's on a line. It's on a straight line. There's not a recognition here that the line turns back in on itself and that the path is really a circle. It's just like the people who don't understand why the Fool card is the most powerful card in a tarot deck. Because to not understand that, you would have to really think that the major arcana unfolds as a straight line. And you'd have to have no knowledge of the seasons and the constant series of deaths and rebirths that are happening on different levels all the time around us constantly, right? You'd have to have, even if there was like a technical literal beginning, it's only one. And then every other Fool card after that is somebody who has completed a cycle, integrated their knowledge, and managed to come back to beginner's mind. That's the power in this. So in order to not get that, you have to have a very, very Western logos-based linear point of view, right? And some of you, maybe you do have this a little bit. Now, the other thing here, like in regards to, you're coming off as very nice people, okay? Very, very polite people, and also somebody who's very refined in terms of their thoughts, and also in terms of how you express yourself. And like I said, you've accumulated a lot of good karmas here. And I feel like all of that leads to a type of person that's really disinclined to take this way you're treating yourself here and how you're judging yourself and your spiritual progress, to take that and then expand it out to really see if that holds true to the fullness of all things. Because if you do that in any direction, it's mean, right? It's mean. But we have to look at it in order to reorient your worldview here to truth. Now, what I mean is that actually the way I want to go about this, Jesus says a quote in the Bible, right? Where it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, to a spiritual novice or to someone spiritually profane, it sounds like maybe he's just being discriminatory against rich people. But I don't think that's what he was doing. I think he was describing that this fortune energy can lend itself to a type of blindness, a type of spiritual blindness. Because, you know, if you take your worldview out, where you don't acknowledge, like Jesus is acknowledging here in this quote, that there's ways. He says another quote too, actually, that will be helpful for us here, where he says, seek ye not your rewards here in the kingdom of earth, right? Those who seek their rewards in the kingdom of earth, their earthly reward is their reward, right? Or something like that. So he's acknowledging that there's different pathways to achieving success in the material world. So what I'm saying about this, like your worldview, where you're saying you only achieve material success based on like past karmas. Now, there's different karmas, okay? Not all of them are past. Some of them are I don't want to get into that. There's many different kinds of karmas. But if you're not acknowledging that there's different pathways to material success, then you'd have to logically think that Elon Musk, who's the richest man who's ever lived, is like somehow the most spiritually enlightened and has the most good karmas. And I'm not meaning to laugh, okay? I'm not. Because it's not to say that Elon Musk is not absolutely loved by our creator at the same huge amount that all of us are, right? Indefinitely and irregardless of any actions that he could possibly take here in this realm, right? But how ridiculous would it be if he turned around and tried to say that the reason he has material success and material wealth is because he's enlightened, or because he's like the most spiritually evolved person that ever was. It would be ridiculous, because Elon Musk has very clearly throughout his history built his wealth upon his I consciousness. He is ego consciousness, and the I believes itself to be an individual and is motivated to compete, right? So it's that level of consciousness that has allowed him to succeed in the material world. Right? Just like when Dr. Strange is talking to the Ancient One and says, I became a doctor to save lives, not take them. And she corrects him and she says, you became a doctor to save one life above all others, your own. Right? This is what Krishna is trying to communicate to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. Same actions, different mindset. You can't just look at a doctor and say, either or, right? That they became a doctor because they're altruistic and they're service oriented and they're completely selfless and they just want to help other people, right? You can't say that. You also can't look at a doctor and say, oh, you became a doctor because you're a rich, greedy a-hole and you're only motivated by self-interest. You can't say that either. Now, certainly you have both camps who become doctors, but it's same action, different mindset, right? And I feel like that's something that's like begging to be acknowledged here in terms of your worldview, and especially like how you judge yourself, like how you place yourself, and even like why you experience different amounts of spiritual success, because being motivated by your I can also generate material success, especially in the short term. That's the devil card, right? Short-term gain over long-term goal. And spiritually speaking, the long-term goal is always liberation, right? Liberation from samsara, right? And there's a story actually about my teacher explaining samsara, and I want to share it with you. But just to continue on this train of thought, because like I said before, you guys are very, very nice people, and I feel like you're disinclined to take this sort of worldview and structure out to its natural ends. But like on the other end of the spectrum, my teacher was someone born in India at the beginning of the 21st century in a small village, born poor, didn't have indoor plumbing. He wore a loincloth like literally his whole life, didn't have shoes, right? Like just lived around this one mountain. And it's this kind of like perspective mixing up like the material world and spiritual world in this like hierarchical way that could lead to the conclusion that someone like my teacher who is perfectly realized has somehow less good karmas than Elon Musk or even someone like myself who got born into America in the 20th century, and I have a fridge and I have pants, and education and access to other things that maybe he didn't have. And I'm hearing like you misunderstand a high birth, what it means to have a high birth, because it's from a worldly perspective. It's from the perspective of the I that is lacking naturally and wants things that you would think a materially well-off birth, even despite like everything I just said about like that Jesus quote and that fortune can be quite blinding, right? That you would just think, oh, well, somebody who has material success, that's a person with a high birth. A high birth, I'm hearing, is being planted in the precise soil depending on what the seed is that you are. Because not all of us need the same growing conditions to awaken in our most, seamless and best manner, right? We all need something a little different. You're not going to plant an orchid seed in the same soil you'd plant a snake plant. I mean, maybe you will. I don't really know about that, but you get what I'm saying. So it's being planted in that perfect soil. And for him, that circumstance was perfect to bring about his enlightenment. Very soon he got enlightened at age 16. How can you look at someone like that, compare them to someone like me, and not feel that he had the higher birth and he had the better karmic propensity because it led him to liberation, right? So there's just this misunderstanding here now in terms of like the story around samsara, okay? So it said like there was this man who came to him and was asking about samsara, was curious about it and how like you break free of it. But he was mostly curious about what it was. Now my teacher, he doesn't really talk, like hardly at all, believes that like the highest spiritual teachings are given in silence because like I was saying before, words are just incredibly limiting and there's a struggle. But sometimes he would use words when he felt like it was appropriate, right? So this man asked like, what is samsara? And he ignored him for 3 days. And then on the third day, there was this fancy pants congressman that showed up at the ashram. And upon this being announced in the hall, most people that were there like got up and en masse went down to go investigate and meet the congressman, right? And this man who'd been asking about samsara didn't get up. He was still sitting there. And so Ramana turns and looks to him and he says, for the last 3 days, you've been asking me, what is samsara? And he said, everybody here in this room came here for enlightenment. And then at the first sign of something shiny, right, they got distracted. That's what the material world is like. And so this overlap between your material success and your spiritual success is actually blinding and it's confusing. It's the equivalent of getting up and walking away from the hall. So he said, that's samsara. That's what keeps us here in the cycle of birth and death. Right? Getting distracted from the original goal of breaking free. And that's where like things can kind of like start getting confusing. Another quote that I just feel like is going to help like explain this is he was explaining something else here and he was saying even if a person believes himself to be a sinner and he says, I am a sinner, it's best for him to turn and face the I and say, who am I? Who is this sinner? Rather than to focus on that word sinner, right? This naming function, right? This good or bad. Instead, turn to the I. That is what will lead you to liberation. Don't get distracted by this like karmic propensity. It's happening. It's happening behind the scenes. The calculations are my husband likes to remind me of this, that the tallying of karma is so complicated. It's not really something that we can wrap our minds around here. But even in the tallying of karma, we fail to turn and look at the I and look at the self-involvement. Do you think a doctor who is working to just make a bunch of money, even though it's technically a service-oriented field, do you think that's the same karma as a doctor who is doing that out of genuine service and care for other people and not worrying about the I and the status and the money and the, right? And getting like reaping the earthly rewards in whatever way it might come? It's not the same karmic calculation because you have to factor in the I. And that's just to illustrate like, that trying to tally this karma as a fool's errand. Now, there's another aspect here of karma that I want to illustrate that I think will be helpful in like shifting this worldview. But it's this weird thing that I'm kind of scared of in regards to karma. And I'm not sharing this story to pass my fear on to you. So if you feel like maybe you could be very susceptible to that, it might be good to just skip forward a ways here while I'm explaining this little bit. Now, the Buddhists, right, like they talk about you can accumulate so much good karmas that you no longer take a human birth. Instead, you get born into the higher realms, the realms of like the devas or the gods. And there you have like, a light body that's beautiful, and the time there goes on for eons and eons and eons, and just everything around you is beautiful and eternal and fragrant and everything you could ever want, right? But the thing about that is, all of this, you're still in the wheel. You've accumulated so much good karmas that now you're not taking human birth. Now you're up in this other realm, but the thing is, it's still running on karma. So eventually that good karma is going to run out. And they say like that process of that happening and that realization is actually like really, really painful. And a lot of them say that it's more painful than being in the hell realms, because when you're at the height of it, and then all of a sudden like you start to fade, like you're starting to fade away and you start to kind of diminish, then everything is so perfect around you that it's almost like they liken it to you emitting like a type of smell or something. So the other beings that are there and they're all perfect, like they can't really get around you. So they just kind of throw flowers at you from afar, and they like say their blessings to you and wish you well and everything. But then you know that your karmic propensity is run out and that you're eventually going to have to take human birth again, and then be in the womb for 9 months and, undergo everything. And just that pain, that realization again, that the path isn't a straight line like you thought it was. Like, no, I built up all my good karmas. The path is a circle, and those good karmas have run out again. So if you want to play the game, it's like fuel, right? If you want to play the game of, oh my gosh, my tank is so full, I can drive into the desert. But eventually, if you don't have an understanding that that gas tank is going to run out, then you could potentially get stranded somewhere you don't want to be, right? And so if you only focus on building up your good karmas, eventually you could not take a human birth. And according to Buddhist thought and philosophy, a lot of you probably already know this, having a human birth is considered the most auspicious, because it's this blend of, the suffering, but also like the goodness that's here and the duality that's here, and in the proportions that they're in. It's ideal for liberation, for waking up. Now, it might not be the most pleasurable experience, but it's most desirable for liberation. And so that's why they tell you not to waste a human life, and certainly not chasing down material success or anything like that, not building your wealth in the land where it will pass away, right? Or being like the doctor that receives his rewards in terms of money and status and reputation and travel and all of that, but instead being the one who forgoes that and builds up the spiritual reward of being of service to other people, right? If that makes sense. So I feel like overall, all of this Suri knowledge that I've shared with you, this is really pointing you towards genuine self-inquiry and inquiry into the real self, the natural self that's described in the Tao, right? The Tao being sort of this antidote to this ordered Western religious thought. It arose as that it opposed Confucianism, because that was the structured religion of the day, but it opposes that religious kind of like worldview. So maybe for a lot of you, it would be helpful to study the Tao. Now, I feel like for a lot of you, this genuine self-inquiry, like all this Suri knowledge, that's what it's saying. It's like, this is not a substitute for genuine self-inquiry and trying to understand. This is not ignoring the self and ignoring society and cultural norms and things like that. Learning about that in order so you know what you're not, right? Like not really. But I feel like a lot of you, this genuine self-inquiry, you are being called to a more Eastern teacher. Someone who maybe is like Ramana Maharshi, who's my teacher, and you can see he's a man of few words. This is not Suri knowledge here, right? This is just a practice. I feel like you're being called to really differentiate between reading about spiritual concepts and things like that, accumulating that very cerebral knowledge and not calling that your spiritual practice or any spiritual in any way. Instead, relating to that more and more like it's just entertainment. I've heard spiritual teachers say that kind of knowledge is a reward for people who love God. It's not It's not really the spiritual practice. Like I was saying earlier, you can be on a mountain and not do any of this and still obtain this because it's the natural state of consciousness. So I feel like though a lot of you are being drawn to this inquiry through like a more Eastern teacher, someone who's had a deep experiential realization that has transformed them and thus echoed out into the world, rippled out into the world. And that, like through the instruction of your teacher, should you take one, and I do feel there's an invitation here for all of you, somewhere in that realm, whether it's with Ramana, whether it's somebody else that you really, really relate to. I just got like a surge of goosebumps. Like, yes, you're being invited. This is like a formal invitation that they will extend their grace to you in order to help facilitate this transformation, to have a genuine experience. But that's your spiritual practice, is the direction of an Eastern teacher who has realized what they're telling you to do, or their practice. Like Ramana's is self-inquiry. And that's something that really, really works for me. And it might work for you, but that's also like a very personal thing. There's something here about the recognition that what works for you won't necessarily work for other people. I do think a lot of you are in positions of like abundance. Maybe you are even teachers, but it's like if you right now at your current state of consciousness, if you know that you're a Western teacher, then own that and say that and be clear about it. And make sure that you can allow people to know that there's a different sort of teacher that's available that could maybe take them to a different place. Don't just allow people to think that you're enlightened either by not correcting the assumption or by like saying, yes, no, I'm a spiritual teacher, right? If you're more akin to like, and I'm talking to myself here, right? Like if you're more akin to like a Vedic scholar or a biblical scholar, the text inside and out. A spiritual teacher and that emblem should really be reserved for this experiential guru level knowledge. And to be fair, Adyashanti even says like enlightenment is not rare. It's really not. What's more rare is being able to carry that, have that be your dominant level of consciousness. Most of us have experienced this enlightened state of consciousness. And most people hold it for about 5 minutes. And then like beyond that is something you typically kind of work towards, right? Or you put in the effort once you know how to access it, right? So pile number 1, this was kind of a wild ride, but what's blocking your vision is this fortune energy, your relation to the material world, the intertwined nature of at least in your mind and how you relate to these concepts between the spiritual and the material world, a naming function, this logos function, a tallying function, and just the overall accumulation of spiritual knowledge in the hopes that it's going to yield you an experiential realization and transformation. When only, like self-inquiry, genuine self-inquiry, like of the natural self will do that. And noting the abundance of that, right? We've been kind of skirting around topics of abundance, right? But like, this is the real wealth. This is like the actual abundance. So, man, I hope that made some semblance of sense. I'm somehow doubtful, but I hope that it did. Because the I wants to accumulate things, right? Success, knowledge, whatever it is, even good karmas, because it will be the I who then experiences those good karmas. The I is looking for an experience, That probably makes no sense, and I'm sorry for my inability to explain this, but I hope that you got something here out of this. Now, for those of you who picked this pile, there was some resources mentioned here. One is the Tao, because the Tao is like super anti-structural. It is that spiritual religious wisdom of the natural self, but it's not that religious structure. And I feel like if you're trying to dismantle that in terms of your worldview and seeping in, I would definitely recommend a study of the Tao, whichever version you find best. I can link mine below that I like. And then if you are curious about my spiritual teacher, or even if you're just looking for a place to start, this is Ramana Maharshi. And you can get this pamphlet at ramanaashram.com or .org. Even when he was alive, it was really important for him that this was affordable. And they often sold this pamphlet for less than what it cost them to print it when that was at all feasible for them, because they just didn't really operate from a place of money. If it's not available there, like, because sometimes they do run out, then you can get this on Amazon. And it cost me, I think when I got this, it cost me $3. It's very, very affordable. But you're talking about like an egoless person here who, like I said, his main goal was that this knowledge was as broadly accessible as possible. So if you're like, ooh, I don't want to buy this on Amazon, if that's your option, I think he'd rather you have it. But that's just me. So also, if you're looking for other looking into Ramana, there's a YouTube channel, David Godman, and he wrote a biography about Ramana. He's lived in India. He's got a lot of stories, and he does have a YouTube channel if you want to check that out. So that's what I have for you guys, pile number 1. I feel like my brain is mush after this. This probably made no sense. I hope you are still with me. If this resonated, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Bye, guys. All right, pile number 2, what is obscuring your vision? What is the log in your own eye? Now, before we get into this, I actually want to read this card from the deck. I didn't do that in pile number 1, but I know this card means something more than just like, eros, like erotic stuff. So let's just read this really fast and then we'll get into the reading. So, okay, it says, love is desire, eroticism, sensuality. Though eros can be depicted as unbridled sexuality and eroticism, a more contemplative understanding of this archetypal energy leads us to the root of desire itself. What do we long for? Why are we awakened by love? What makes us hesitate in the face of intimacy? Eros reconnects us with the primal longing to merge with another human being, nature, music, art, plants, food, or anything we perceive we are separate from. Eros allows us to momentarily unite. Our hearts embrace otherness, and in doing so, we further understand our own. Our life force awakens. This card reveals an inevitable initiation into love's labyrinth. You may find yourself swirling in a new territory of desire and sensuality. Explore the labyrinth with a curious and honest heart, and remember, though the way is circuitous, though the way is circuitous, you are always being led towards its center. Sorry, I've never seen that word before. Okay. So, all right. There was a lot in there and it circled around desire, and maybe I'll just like even go through that. Like, there are so many things that were sticking out to me. First of all, it said the Force Awakens. I don't know if some of you guys caught that. And then like this sword, it's reminding me of like, you know, Jedi Knight lightsaber kinds of energy. But then when you couple that with desire, what's the ones that are it's not the Jedi, but it's the Sith, right? The Sith in Star Wars, like they run on desire, and desire energy is the opposite energy of love, because desire is, it's like this unquenchable thirst. Or as the Buddhists, there's this one phrase where they use to describe desire that is, oh, what is it? It's the fever of something longing, the fever of unsatisfied longing. There we go. And it's not just one thing with this pile. It really points to desire as an engine here. And I feel like this has been built up for lifetimes. To be honest, I really actually feel that you're meant to, it's part of your path to explore desire here in this incarnation in a lot of different arenas. I'm just getting a lot of, you know, fiery, very hot-blooded energy for this pile. And I think it unfolds personally as an engine in your romantic relationships, but also in career as an engine for success, wealth, status, respect, admiration, you know, and so on. So whenever this desire energy activates, no matter what your goal or your person or the object here. And I feel like this has happened several times. Like there's definitely a situation that the cards are pointing to now, but I think if you're honest with yourself, this has happened over and over again. I think whenever it happens though, like it just completely floods your senses and it takes over your focus, and you can become very, very single-minded in your pursuit of it, and you work really hard. You really do. But ultimately, this whole cycle is ignited from a place of lack. Like the book was saying something like, Eros makes us want to merge with what we perceive we're separate from, or something that we lack, you know, something like that. So there's this foot on the gas, foot on the brake, you know, whenever there's this object or goal in sight, like it's all, everything moves forward, you know, and everything moves towards it. And then it restricts. And there is this like emptiness or this like feeling of lack again. And I think this plays out for you, and it all centers around this craving. Like yesterday, I gave into my desire and I had a caramel chew. And I kid you not, every moment since then, my brain has asked me if I could have another one. But I know it's just going to be this momentary happiness. And then it's going to be right back to the craving. So I stay strong for now, you know? And I feel like that is a perfect segue to lead us to this happy little situation in the corner. That desire lies. It's duplicit. It promises us, or it masquerades as love, fulfillment, healing, you know, fame, whatever. But it just leads to more burden, more emptiness, more distance, another like stronger feeling of lack. So for me, this is all about conquering the lower nature, Saturn and Sagittarius. And honestly, through understanding desire fully. And here's where I think a lot of people get spirituality wrong, at least Eastern spirituality. And I hope you're not getting this wrong about me, you know, or spiritual people. There is an acknowledgement that there's pretty great stuff here, you know, on earth and in this realm. And so why not explore it? That's why I think sages have always given advice to kings, and they've provided outlines for society structures and, you know, whatever else. But the truth of this place, this realm and its troves of treasures that, you know, the truth of it is that it just doesn't ultimately satisfy. And I feel like you're learning that here with desire. There's a quote from the Buddha about the path of renunciation where he says something like, I'm paraphrasing this, but it's like, look, you've been around this ride so many times. You've grieved so many fathers and sons. You've had so many different experiences. You've had all the experiences, right? That you've earned your boredom with it. you can let it go. And so he describes like the path of renunciation as this natural falling away, not this forced restriction, forced to take vows for no reason because logically they know that this the other way. It's not that forced path at all. It's this natural falling away where you've earned your boredom with it. And I feel like that's what you're doing here. You are earning your boredom with desire. And I feel like some of you, you're not there yet, and that's fine. Of course it's fine. So enjoy it, but also be watchful and start to notice the lies, the cracks. Don't let the highs of desire in whatever arena delude you from ignoring the pain, because desire brings pain in some way for some time for someone. And whatever it promises never lasts, and you're left back where you started or worse. But don't, pile number 2, do not take my word for this. Don't just accept this logical explanation. That's not your path. Experience and learn through that experience, know it for real. There is a lot of tamasic energy here, which is the energy of illusion and attachment. So, and that is the spiritual path. Okay, it is. But that's ultimately, we're asking what's clouding your vision here. And it is that tamasic, desirous energy. So one thing I want to point out though, is that in pile number 1, sorry about that, there was an emphasis on opposition between seeking and finding. The one who seeks isn't the one who finds. And here, there's a distinction between wanting and having. I've said this before, but as Esther Perel says, at play in infidelity oftentimes, which it might be a theme that you've dealt with in one way or another, she says that the verb that's most associated with marriage is to have, right? To have and to hold. But the verb associated with desire is to want or to crave. I can't remember which one, but regardless, that's an infinite conundrum here. Because once you have what you want, you're back to the same boat that you were in before, maybe just orbiting a different island. And that could be, again, in career, in a goal, with romantic relationships. This is going to play out in many different arenas. But the thing is, this desire lies. Whatever satisfaction or wholeness or peace you're looking for, it's not ever out here in something external. The Buddha says all externals are unstable and therefore cannot bring peace. The thirst is within. And there might very well be some thirsty energy, but it can only be quenched from within. And we've talked about that little Scorpio conundrum before, that scorpionic intensity and the drive towards 8th house stuff, sex, the occult, taboo. It's just a misplaced craving for wholeness or spirit, something that's bigger than yourself. That's probably why AA, like Alcoholics Anonymous, the most evidence-based successful addiction treatment program to this day, directs people to a higher power or a higher purpose. So there's a lot here about a specific situation, pile number 2, and it could be career, romance, or both, to be honest. And I haven't focused too much on it because I feel like that's the current external that's masquerading as satisfaction. And I don't necessarily want to put your attention back onto the object. I want to help point it towards the source of the craving, the voice that's lying. But I can see here that there's something. And I do just want to point out that in limerence literature, the person, like the crushed person that you have a crush on, is referred to as an object, the limerent object, because objects serve a function, and the people in our lives that we love, they don't necessarily serve a function, or maybe they shouldn't exactly. The Vedas point to 3 different kinds of relationships. Desire, which is defined by our wanting. Business, which is defined... I'm so sorry about all the noises, you guys. I think my husband's printing something. There's desire that is defined by our wanting. There's business that's defined by an exchange. And then there's love, which is defined by our desire to give. And I feel like whether it's a leadership position or this drive to succeed or a love situation, I feel like asking yourself where your energy is. Are you desiring to exchange? Are you desiring to give? Or are you wanting something? Are you coming from this place of need or of lack? So there's also attachment style stuff going on here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I feel like we do talk about it. There is some kind of insecure attachment. So I feel like you're either fearful or anxious. I think a lot of you are anxious attachment or fearful avoidant, which is the switch hitter, where you can present as the anxious, but regardless. Insecure attachment is calling to you and it's pulling on you to engage it through a lie or some kind of pretty illusion that wholeness or peace or happiness is found and maintained through through gaining an external. If only you had this person, right? Or this job or this recognition or this apartment. And of course, you could get that object of your desire, right? Through your own behavior modification in some way. That's what the tape tells you. And whatever behavior modification on your part that your mind's going to tell you to do is going to depend on your own core wounds and the flavor of your own insecure attachment, right? So, like, if you're anxious, then that tape says, I'll be whatever they want me to be. I'll be whatever. I'll do whatever, right? Just give me the love, or give me the job, give me this person, give me this experience, right? And then on the surface, especially like expressed through that behavior, it may look like love, like how I was describing the love from the Vedas, right? That's defined by our desire to give, because on the surface, it looks like the impulse is to give. But notice, I'll give whatever, I'll do whatever, I'll be whatever, just give me this person, give me this experience. If you remove this experience, then my desire to give is eroded. So the base motivation isn't actually to give, like the mind is trying to convince you here. It's to want, it's to crave. It's desire. And it's important to recognize that underlying base motivation of craving and desire, even when the mind's being crafty and beguiling and throwing all this Maya and illusion on things. Because we all do this to some extent, right? I've been watching a lot of stuff where there's just a lot of researchers now, in like especially evolutionary sciences, evolutionary psychology, where we're actually not evolved to see reality very clearly. It hasn't necessarily been like beneficial in terms of mating. And when you look at our mating rituals in society, you know, you can kind of see that there's all those books and stuff about how to be like a wingman or whatever they call them, you know? So we all do this. Now, there's also some mention here of the paternal lineage in your family. So there's like lots of expectations and very conditional love and very conditional support. So actually, that's control masquerading as love, right? And that's Taurus Scorpio axis. So see how the mind is throwing illusion here, even in this original scenario from your childhood, where control, aka those relationships that are defined by wanting and craving, what the Vedas call desire. And it might be weird to think about a familial and parental relationship involving desire, but a lot of them do. And then that leads to control. That's always been at least associated in your mind incorrectly, because it's been labeled as love. And in a way, you can kind of see how like a child's natural deferentialness to their parent and wanting to give to the parent, wanting to please them, that's almost been warped and weaponized. So that, as the Vedas was saying, like that base desire to give that is defined by love, it's like that impulse, it got warped early on. So there might be a lot of these different ways, or a lot of different arenas in your life where these love and power dynamics are coupled together in a way that you can't quite tell them apart. And the cards are saying that you can work towards this conscious uncoupling with diligence and practice, like, you know, like a meditation, but it's going to take consistent effort to challenge the truth of these thoughts and these impulses whenever they arise. And if you don't want to do this, then don't worry about any of this anyways, right? Because like I was saying earlier, this is all about you earning your boredom with desire. So that in and of itself is a path. Like it's that is a way forward. So there's also a dichotomy here between the autocrat and the democrat, the leader in the crowd. And that can tie back into this blending of love and power dynamics and this strong base craving energy, because maybe you learned that to be love, you need to be leonine. You need to be powerful, strong. You need to be a leader. You need to be in the spotlight, a king, a queen, right? Special in some way, set apart from the crowd, set apart from others. And of course, to be set apart from others is actually the opposite definition of connection. So maybe that's where some of the avoidant attachment styles come in, or in the switch hitters, right? The fearful avoidance that can sometimes be anxious and then sometimes be avoidant. There's a middleman and a lie, and those two together are feeding this craving. There's the thought that you need to be special or strong or have this position or carefully crafted image of authenticity or strength, whatever else. There's the belief that you need to be worthy of love and connection with others, with yourself, and with the universe. So this is where you end up pouring your energy and focus into, with the hopes of it producing the desired result, which I think is love. So did you hear it? That underlying base motive. Because it's wanting, it's this craving, it's this lack. And it's convincing you to expend energy on these unstable externals that cannot be relied upon. This voice of desire is trying to convince you to pursue it in a never-ending game of cat and mouse, because the goalposts move. And maybe they did when you were a kid too. But you're grown now, and a lot of you can see this, the futility of it, the drain of it, the burden of it. So, real quick though, for some of you, this isn't just manifesting through career or image or some kind of other external goal, but it's also manifesting with a love interest. And there's opposites energy here in order to help you see this pattern playing out within. That's how I feel the universe is setting this up. So there's a love interest that you can't quite obtain. There's distance here, emotionally or physically. And it could go either way, right? Like they're either this Aquarian, Democrat, equality loving, freedom loving, probably taking a different path in life, or they're this Leonine, King of Wands, sexy, independent, right? Large and in charge. I need to be set apart. I need to be seen, celebrated. I need to feel special and in control, type of a person. It could go either way. And there could be this energy that ties you and this person together. I feel like this desire energy, to be honest, if you want this person, I feel like you've had each other in past lives. I feel like you've built this desire energy up together, so you're dismantling it together. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So you want this person's love and attention. You crave it because I feel like there's a part of you that thinks that it would make you feel whole or would make you feel worthy of love in some way. But even though this is a person, right, your mind is almost relating to them more like an object. And I know that can be triggering to look at, but even though it is hard and it might sting, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't look at it or that it's wrong. In fact, I feel like what these cards are saying, that's the way through, is to observe yourself and observe how you're relating to this person. And because you're kind of relating to this person or even this goal through this distorted lens of Maya illusion, and that lens is expectation. If I'm with this person, I'm going to be whole, I'm going to be fulfilled, right? This unstable external. But it's not for this person to be obtained by you. They're not some prize to be won. And even if you did obtain them in whatever way, your verb would move from wanting to having, and your interest would wane, and that little desire voice would move the goalposts on you again. There'd be another itch for you to scratch, another external object for your mind to throw your attention at, and then on and on and on and on and on. And the mind can do this with anything, right? Pick your poison. Love, career, snacks, right? As the Buddha says, whether you drink your poison in private or public, the result is the same. So this can be anything. And it can be obvious to people or not, but the result is still the same. So I feel like at the end of the day, this passion energy is actually even obscuring and blinding your vision to the real purpose of this connection, because I feel like this person or this situation, or many of them, right? Like whatever it may be, it's a reminder, it's an opening, an invitation to a practice. Because the way out of this is triumph over the lower natures. And if you think about it, the lower natures are our animal natures, our instinct, but not helpful instinct. Like when you touch a hot stove and you pull your hand away, or you're walking in the woods and you see like something big and scary out of the corner of your eye, so you turn and look and your pupils dilate so you can take in all that visual information. Not something like that. This is more like unchecked instinct that actually has not proven itself to be valuable. It's more vestigial. It needs to fall away. And an instinct that's been weaponized by the mind, because instinct is a powerful thing to get weaponized by the mind, because the space between thoughts is non-existent. It has to be for an instinct to function. So this instinct has been weaponized by the mind through a series of false promises of ultimate happiness and fulfillment, something it cannot provide. So now it's writing checks it can't cash. And just looking squarely at that reality and at the rotten fruits is how I want to put it. I know it's like an image, but like just looking at the rotten fruits of those empty promises, the envy, the exhaustion, the emptiness, the lack, the addiction, the pain, goes on and on, right? That's going to go a long way in overcoming it, because you're no longer lying to yourself. Yeah, there's almost like a parasite of the mind that's just draining you of your own energy. So it's not the sexy answer, but the Knight of Pentacles is steadfast. and he has his plot, and he tends to it diligently, which I feel like in this case, that's a metaphor for the mind, right? Like all the Eastern religions saying just like tending to the mind, but also like whatever is yours, just tend to it diligently. Whatever your job is, just tend to it diligently. Whatever your role is, tending to it diligently. That is ultimately what is going to lead you to this 10 of Cups, to ultimate fulfillment, to ultimate happiness. And the 10 of Cups in the tarot, it's Mars in Pisces. Pisces can indicate a loss of something, and Mars is self. It is striving, it's sexual energy, it's aggression, right? So this practice, this ritual, this date, this steadfast tending, that's actually all of the things you really want in a leader or a partner, right? Anyways, because the best leader isn't just somebody who wants to sit on stage and they love the sound of their own voice and they want to hear the applause, right? They're the one with the experience, the one who knows themselves inside and out, the one who knows the company or the task, whatever it is they're talking about inside and out, because they've been doing it diligently and persistently, even when it wasn't fun or flashy or desirable. So they, in a sense, were leaders before they had the title of leader. They led with their action. They were the verb leader before they were the position leader. And we don't always get to see that in people. When spirit is what exalts them, when their karmic propensity is what exalts them. We don't always get to see that. We can only relate to it as an external, as a lack, because our own has not yielded those results yet. But it's the same with a partner, right? This is the same that you want in a partner. Somebody who's diligent, somebody who shows up, somebody who knows themselves, somebody who takes responsibility for themselves. They know the topic inside and out. That's what ultimately leads to this happiness. And then I'm just noticing here, they've got the Ace of Cups. They've got this brand new beginning. They've got this pure love, and it's the masculine and feminine intertwined, which I'm reading as like the hemispheres of the brain, the right and the left hemisphere of the brain that are working in perfect harmony here. So what's blocking your vision? Pile number 2, craving, desire, externals, and almost like a defenselessness of the mind against this game of fetch with desire. It always wants to go after the stick. And this is something that Eastern traditions have passed down for eons. This is a part of the human condition. It's baked in, right? It's just pick your poison. How does it show up in your life? What's the strongest stick that your mind wants to go after? Or maybe not even, maybe there's multiple and you're just working through your sticks, you know? There's even a phrase about like the lion that maintains his stare once you've thrown the stick. Like that's when you know you're in trouble. That's the mind that's been meditating, like the lion that keeps his gaze where he wants it even when the stick has been thrown. That is the higher invitation of this connection. So the desire could be blinding you to thinking that it's something much less than that. Scratching of an itch, the obtaining of a person or an experience. This is an invitation into a practice that will ultimately give you freedom. And even if for some of you you're not ready to take that step yet, this is an invitation to grow bored with desire, so that eventually it will just fall away. But that's what I have for you guys, pile number 2. If that resonated, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Bye guys. Pile number 3. What is the log in your own eye here? What is clouding your vision? So I'm going to be really honest with you, pile number 3. I am intimidated by this pile because, well, actually, for a couple of reasons. The first one is that for a lot of you who picked this pile with a subject on your heart, I think it's a very heavy subject, something of the 8th house that involves like death, loss, trauma, phobia, repressed materials. And if you didn't come here asking about something like that, then I feel like spirit wants to talk with you along these lines because it could be what's, clouding your vision here. And that's fine, right? We talk about this kind of stuff a lot, honestly, around here, but this feels different to me because for a lot of you, this feels like fresher. Either it's recently happened or it's still happening, or at least emotionally speaking, this is something that's still very fresh and alive in your mind. And I'm, of course, happy to relay this message that Spirit has given me here, but traumatic situations are always very personal when they happen, and I just think that they also need to be addressed personally, too, and I just get worried sometimes when I see things like that, and I'm like, ooh, I think a general tarot reading can have the potential to do more harm than good, and I just want to be upfront about that so you can make your decisions here. And if you need help getting started, finding a therapist or something like that, I always have resources in the description box below. So okay, so the next reason that this pile intimidates me, I just feel like I need to do this for my own sake before we get into this, and also for yours so you can make your decision. But I feel like these cards are talking about a number of very different situations, which is always the case with a pick a card reading, but usually their sameness is more emphasized, like the common root, but the differences are being highlighted as more important here. And for some of you, I feel like that's a message here about what's clouding your vision, that the differences are actually what's more important. Like there's something here that like maybe it's same or it feels like it matches up, but there are important differences here that are clouding your vision, or maybe that's part of what's clouded. So okay. Yeah, so I think I'm done prompting, but with that said, now's the time like to go ahead and click off if you feel like this reading isn't for you, or you want to sit on it and decide whether or not you want to listen to this reading. So if you're sticking around, please go easy on me with this one. But that's actually an Adele song, Easy on Me. Yeah, so yeah, I feel like that song's a message for some of you. You can't deny how hard I've tried. I changed who I was. I put you both first, but now I give up. Go easy on me. I was still a child. No time to choose what I chose to do. Yeah. I feel like definitely listen to that song. I had good intentions and the highest hopes, but I know right now it probably doesn't even show. Like I feel like definitely go check out that song, because I feel like the whole thing's probably a message, but if it's not, there's some good nugs in there. So okay, moving on into the reading now. The first thing that I'm getting, especially if there was some kind of a conversation here, right? There could have been like sugar, like a blood sugar issue, or maybe even like an intoxicant issue here that was impacting the situation, or the nervous system even. It also could have been that the conversation was like overly polite, but beneath the surface, there's a lot of really, really deep, really intense emotions, like the 8th house stuff, fears, traumas, right? Something like that. But you didn't know because of the manners, or like this person's really polite. And another possibility, or even if this person isn't polite, they were maybe trying to be polite in the situation, even despite the fact that they were dealing with some like really, really heavy issues. I know, where they went out of their way to be like really polite about this topic or this conversation that you had, because Gemini is 8th from the 8th house. And so it's the higher self of the 8th house. So it's like there was all of these 8th house issues, sex, death, taboo, fears, trauma, like whatever it is here in this situation, that's just these deep, turbulent emotions. And there was a lot of processing that was going on. Mentally, I feel like this person had maybe they just think a lot about their issues, or they thought a lot about this issue. They went back and forth. They could have had conversations about this with siblings, friends, like their inner community resources. They could have traveled somewhere, like the ocean, or I don't know, something like that. In order to, it's almost like a refinement process that things are going through here with Neptune, in order to be able to communicate about this in like a polite, balanced way. That with this Neptune in your energy here, because Neptune likes to pull things up, and it likes to make everything seem like better than it actually is, and oh, everything's fine, everything's great, like no, this isn't a big deal, I can handle it, right? But meanwhile there's all these eighth house turbulent issues like kind of beneath the surface. But there's a real striving to be able to communicate this in a balanced way. Maybe you do this, maybe this is something. It's hard for me to tell if this is you or another person, because Gemini is such a social house. It deals with our siblings and our friends and conversations. So if this is you, then I feel like your habit of doing that, of trying to process your emotions in order to like be able to be polite and balanced, it's masking the fact that there's still like these deep, turbulent issues there for you. But also this could be your person, or there could even be a mirroring between the two of you here with this Geminian energy. Just take whatever resonates with your situation. So another possibility, and this won't be for everybody, this is like a specific scenario, right? But there is a possibility that maybe you hooked up with a friend, and maybe you were both drunk, and there was like a hidden or subconscious motivation for sex on one or both ends. And then that impacted the conversation, maybe before and after. Obviously before, but then if you were texting later or something like that, then maybe this person was like, I don't know, like drunk and horny and just feeling really friendly or something. Or like you guys were friends, and maybe then you hooked up, and so then this person felt like they wanted to be just like nice and casual and friendly and like, oh, hey, but there's something here that's like masking the eighth house stuff, the deep stuff, like fears or phobias, something like that. And whatever is masking it, it's like manners or alcohol or sugar. But in this case, it's like sugar and spice and everything nice, something like that. And another way this could shake out is that this is like a polite, well-mannered person, and you had a polite, well-mannered conversation, but then beneath the surface, there was just a lot of deep, turbulent emotions. That's the Gemini energy here. And maybe this is something you don't understand about yourself or about your person. The situation is this duality, and this is somehow the log in your eye, or it's clouding your own perception. Like maybe you feel like deeper than you think you do because you're being like polite, or they do something like that. I feel like an old trauma got inflamed here. And maybe for more than one person. Like, I think for some of you, there's grief. There's deep loss here of a friend, a sibling, even a child, soul fam. That's what I mean. This is tough stuff. And now this loss, it's showing up as a cord cutting of some kind that helped a soul progress to another realm. And I know that sounds metaphysical. For some of you, maybe you did lose a child through death. Again, that's not going to be for everybody. But some of you, again, like you hooked up with a friend and now they don't talk to you now. Maybe somebody even like got pregnant, but then as soon as the cord was cut, it's like the situation changed. Then they don't talk to you, You could have lost, there could have been a conversation where this was a friend or a sibling, right? There's so many situations here, but I feel like whatever it is, there's a loss. And even if like Gemini's children, you've got children here like a lot, maybe student. There's a lot of different ways that this could shake out. But I feel like the big part here is you're asking like, why? Why did this happen to you? Why did this wreck you? And what you need to know here, what's clouding your vision, is that there was no intention to hurt you. Not from this person, not from the universe or anywhere else. Now, that doesn't mean that you didn't get hurt, right? Unfortunately, we can't control how everything goes in our life. Like if we could just intend everything and it all unfolded that way, right? Like everything would be golden, right? It just doesn't always work that way. I'm just not seeing that there was like this explicit intention to hurt you like here at all. It's more like a mirroring and a mutual opposite triggering of each other's respective eighth houses, right? Fears, phobias, and traumas. Like an anxious and avoidant attachment style, honestly, right? Because like the anxious attachment style, their core wound, their big thing is like, whatever you do, don't abandon me, right? And that wound can actually get kind of tricky, and it can try to trap people into not abandoning, try to get their hooks in, right? In one way or another. That might not be so obvious on the surface when it's plutonic, right? And under the surface. But with an avoidant, their big wound is, well, then don't enmesh me. Don't engulf me. Don't try to consume me into you, right? So That maybe is a little harder to understand, but it's like, just honor my individuality, refuse to interact with me in any way except for my explicit consent every step of the way, and we'll be just fine. But you can see how those two polar opposite wounds can like conflict with each other some of the time, often like fire and gasoline, right? So that's what I mean. It's like these tapes are just playing. There's not the intention to hurt. There's more of an intention here to prevent you from letting yourself be victimized or victimizing other people. It's like more of a defensive measure on like whoever's both of your sides or whatever is going on here. And if you lost someone to death here, which won't be for everybody, but this sentiment goes for you too, that there was never an intention to hurt you. And in that case, maybe you're asking why, because it was sudden or it was too soon. But even here, if you're asking the universe or the soul that's passed on, it wasn't to hurt you. There is, though, that stimulation of your 8th house. And that's a part of what's clouding you and blocking your vision, is that you're seeing this event or these actions through a trauma wound or even through a phobia. It could be even of death, right? Or something like that. But before we can go on here, you and this soul, whoever you're asking about, right? Whatever your situation is here, you love each other very much on a soul level. You do. And there is going to be a reunion on that level. And I don't want to get into like spiritual theory and this and everything like that, but whatever happened was meant to get you thinking about spiritual things on a visceral level, but logically, in a logical way. Some of you haven't moved on from processing the situation on an emotional level because you feel punished. And so you're suffering your punishment through this grief and through this torment or something like that. But these events, however scary or painful and traumatic, right, all 8th house words, they're meant to, right, we've got Bharani energy here. They're meant to help you forward. That's an energy that lubricates the soul in order to assist it and be a launch pad to move your soul from one state of consciousness to another, from one place to another. For both of you, I feel like that's what's going on here. There's that stimulus. And some of you might resonate with pile number 2. And some of you are meant to, even if the situation doesn't involve death, I feel like some of you are meant to seriously and logically look into reincarnation. And like, just to help you understand like that this relationship's playing out on 2 different levels. And I know that's not everybody's cup of tea, but that's where this reunion energy is coming in on, right? And just to help you along the way, like you can look into near-death stuff or past life regression stuff, but some of the most compelling evidence out there for reincarnation is children remembering their past lives or like remnants of their past lives to the point where it can actually be verified. And the University of Virginia is a great place to start with that because there's no separation, there's no end. Not really. And I think you and this person don't have a similar understanding of that. So, yeah, I mean, you're going to meet up with this person. I'm going to just tell you this little anecdote and then we're going to get back on track here. I mean, this is still part of the reading. I think it's going to be helpful. But when I was I was new at Omega, the spiritual retreat center that I was really introduced to spirituality, like strong. And I was very skeptical about a lot of stuff. I walked by, we had this free bin, so people would put like books and stuff in there. And I picked this book up out of the free bin. And I don't even remember what it was called, but it was some kind of like channeling text. And I was like, oh boy, here we go. And I was just out of curiosity, I flipped it open to a page just to honestly like see what was in it. Cause I had no idea what would be in something like that. And it was explaining that, here on earth, we have like our relationships and stuff unfold, but we don't realize that a lot of the people, even like the people that hurt us the most or that we find completely annoying and like grating, they're our closest confidants in heaven. And it's just something we can't understand from this side of the veil and like from this level of understanding, because how the book, at least how this channeler described things happening is, we'll say, well, I really need to learn this lesson about abandonment, or something like that. And like your best friend's soul will be like, well, I'll do it, and like you go in together, you come into this, like playing, like it's a simulation, right? Like playing a video game, you're playing with your best friends and maybe you go on some hard levels. And that, I know that's not everybody's cup of tea, but it's a sentiment that's been really comforting for me over the years, and just trying to look at it from that perspective. And maybe that's helpful here for some of you, but I just, I wanted to throw that in. Okay, so another thing here is that there's an enmeshment wound, and it's really hard for me to tell in this pile where these things are coming from because there's group energy here. Some of you I feel like are asking about a literal child, But then for others of you, there's a relationship dynamic here that's showing up as like one anxious attachment style person and one avoidant attachment style person. So you have like a lot of similar early family dynamics, a lot of similar wounds and like memories and experiences. It's like mirrored, it's reflected. One of you became avoidant, one of you became anxious, and that dynamic is playing out. So there's just this mirrored energy. So take this however it's resonating, but there is like an indication of this enmeshment wound, and that happens when like a child feels responsible for managing one or both parents' emotions, or when a child is treated more like a partner, a friend, or a spouse than a child that is developing and needs help developing in an emotional way and in other ways as well. It also can happen when there's like trauma, in an early home that kind of shuffles around the dynamics, or when a parent is an addict, or a lot when there's a mental illness. I know cluster B is really known for producing enmeshment wounds, so that dramatic, erratic emotional pattern. And that's indicated here, that there's some sort of emotional volatility or instability. But somebody here is making light of it. So I don't know if this is you making light of like your own enmeshment wound. And if that's the case, then it's being mirrored. So you're making light of somebody else's. And that's clouding your vision. It's clouding your judgment too, because you're not understanding like the depth of the eighth house, first of all, and all these deep like psychological patternings and habits that they become like tapes, and especially fears. It turns into like this clinging and stuff like that. Or you could be making light of this child's like family situation and enmeshment wounds, but the way it's coming through is like pretty intense, because this is very specific, but shift this around. The cards are being very specific about it. If it's, if you need to switch this around, but it's like saying that dad was an addict and mom was emotionally unstable in some way. Like maybe cluster B, dramatic, erratic, up and down. But maybe also like something here like as a victim, but she was like an adult in the house, but it's almost like this child felt like they had to walk on eggshells around the mom, or that it's almost like mom kind of just didn't function in the world in some way, where this child felt like there were certain topics that they couldn't bring up, or even if they were having like a strong emotional something or a need to push away, that if they did that, the mom was just going to break or fall apart, right? And a lot of this is done subconsciously, and it's like guilt and shame, like don't ever treat me like your dad treated me, or don't ever leave me like your cousin Polly, or, whatever it is. Like it's usually subconscious, but it's that manipulative, like posing as a victim, but actually victimizing others kind of a situation here. So that's where that enmeshment like really kind of comes in. So the child feels more like a crutch, to the mom, like they serve a necessity or function, or like mom was really like pitying, or this could have also been dad, or this could just be one parent who was like all of these things. So basically neither of these parents were managing their own emotions, at least not effectively. And then this child was trying or expected to do just that. So they had to learn how to be polite and put on that brave face and bury their eighth house issues. And so it's like, not only did they not have guidance in learning how to move through the emotional realm and feel and express and sort through their emotions in a healthy way, they had to bury emotions, and then they had adult emotions, which are way more intense, dumped right on them. And that's the definition of trauma, is being confronted with things before you're developmentally ready, or just even before, like when you don't have the energy or the resources in whatever way to deal with it. That is like what creates trauma in the psyche, and that's here. So this becomes this eighth house content that's now blocking your understanding. Either, again, it's like for yourself or for this child. There's a Garth Brooks song that I'm hearing, and it's like, mama was a looker, Lord, I should shine. Papa was a good one, but the jealous kind. Papa loved mama, mama loved man. Mama's in the graveyard, papa's in the pen. So it's this like family dynamic that's defined by these kind of just turbulent, dramatic, erratic elements that then impact your own childhood, or this person's, or both of yours. But then somebody has this enmeshment wound, they could swing avoidant because they're used to feeling engulfed and completely engulfed, and they don't have their consent and their no and their individuality like recognized and acknowledged by the parent and their problems. Usually avoidant people are special people too. Like a lot of people want to merge with them, but they don't care whether or not they want to merge back. So basically, whatever's gone on here has plunged you and or another person or a child into the realm of the eighth house. And I feel like you want to move forward. Like your energy here, or like whoever this is you're asking about, like somebody here just wants to move forward, take action on it, like just but it feels like a bull in a china shop to the other person, to the other energy that's involved. And like the way that the cards are saying to move forward is actually to be more reflective. I feel like you or this person feels like it's no use. Like you're so different in some way. And again, it's this like, it could be that somebody felt like their no was disrespected, their consent, their emotional consent, their right to be an individual was disrespected, and that was acted upon in some way. So for the person, whoever did that, it's like, oh, we're so different because you could do that to me that like, I feel like we can't, how do you say words? You know what I mean? Or, like, there's something here where I feel like there's something really, really intense here. But I think spiritually, maybe, too, like, you're so different, or through these wounds. There's a feeling that it could be just no use to talk. But we do have a person that I feel like is not wanting to victimize or be victimized here. And maybe a child who couldn't or can't defend themselves against negative forces. So this is all about contemplation and reflection on the 8th house. It's not about action. And I feel like you're processing it like it's an action. And part of that is because you have a completely, like, honestly, I feel like very, very different worldview than this person. And also, if this situation has like age differentials or role differentials, that's also clouding the situation, because like the younger one, the one that's like a child or a student or is seen as weaker in some way, is a teacher here as well. Like you both have things to teach each other. So that's another thing that could be clouding this. There was a lot here, and I feel like there's so many more like things to this situation. I'll end on this. Nobody who with this situation is probably still listening to this, but if you are a person who's lost a child, like especially if you lost a child young, there is a lot in like the literature, past life literature, or past life regression, near-death experience, and also like these the children with past life memories, that says a lot of times children come in and they're sick or they die. These are a lot of times they're highly advanced souls that love you very, very much and that come in order to teach you a lesson here. And if there's some sort of child dynamic here, then this is like an older soul. Let's like a strong soul or something like that has come in to teach you a difficult lesson, possibly through loss, and through this plunge into the 8th house. There's a plunge into some sort of like maturity here, right? There's Persephone energy in this pile, and that's somehow clouding things of like the dual nature of that, where you're the maiden, but Persephone means bringer of death, you know? So actually, okay, I'll say one more thing. The last thing I want to mention is the numbers, because we've got 2 5s here. So there's some kind of unexpected difficulty because of others. And then we've got, I saw another 7. Okay, yeah, no, we've got 2 7s, which is decisions cannot be rushed. And then, yeah, remember that Adele song, I had no time to choose what I chose to do? Anyway, and then we've got 2 6s here, which is favors from others. So I just wanted to throw that in there in case that helps you understand like your own specific situation here, because like I said, I feel like there's many. But there is some kind of expansiveness through fear here. So, man, I hope that made sense. This was a very difficult reading, all 3 piles. So please be easy on me. I'm exhausted. I'm going to go take a nap. If this resonated with you or if you found this helpful in any way, please do like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Bye, guys.